Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris. On today's episode, we are celebrating one of the most electrifying athletes in sports history, in tennis history. Of course, that is Rafael Nadal. From epic comebacks to record breaking wins, Nadal's career has a history of unforgettable moments. It is jam packed. And over the next half an hour or so, we're going to be regaling our top 10 Rafael Nadal moments at Tennis Weekly HQ.
The Kim episode, this is also called.
It's basically the Kim episode. Yeah, Kim, we're heavily leaning on your encyclopedic knowledge of Rafael Nadal, all his career, to get us through this episode.
Well, there might just be a lot of, I was here when that match happened. And I remember, how stressed I was.
Not at the match, but we were somewhere.
We were somewhere like at an exam or on holiday or in a toilet or in a cupboard at work doing the live scoring, trying to check for updates. I
spent many a year looking at the live scores for that. And Kim, it is a slightly emotional episode, potentially. We did one of these previously for Andy Murray. Joel managed to keep it together. Will he be able to keep it together now that the time has come for Nadal to say goodbye to professional tennis?
Yeah, I'll save my tears for next week when he steps onto court, because disclaimer, we are recording this prior to Malaga, the Davis Cup finals. So maybe a couple of days from now when this is released. But yes, the final hurrah has not yet happened. So we're being slightly presumptive and
still an
doing
active
this
player.
Because he's still an active player, and maybe one of our top 10 moments might be in Malaga to come.
Well, maybe. But we do have our top 10 moments from his career. And as always, we do have some criteria that we run by ourselves to make this list. First of all, these are moments that have happened in his senior career, and they are on the tour. That's, of course, including Grand Slams, team events, as well as the Olympics. And as well, it's just a bit of fun, guys. Remember, this is our list. It's completely subjective. We'd love to hear what your top 10 is, but these are just our opinions. And we're gonna get stuck in, aren't we?
We are. There were some that didn't make the cut. There'll be some honourable mentions.
There was a lot of debate
along the way.
I mean, we
could have arguably done a top 20 list for just given how many achievements Nadal has had over his career.
I mean, you could probably have a top 100 list of epic matches.
Well, you get to
matches.
Well, you get to 20 just from slams, don't you? So, I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, let's kick ourselves off, and I will bring everyone number 10, which is, I guess, perhaps quite a general one. It's his rivalry with Roger Federer. There have been a number of moments over the years between them. I think a lot of us will think of that moment at the Laver Cup when Federer retired. They were, holding hands, crying together. Yes. Ellie Goulding was playing live, and it was just such an emotional moment. I was crying. I don't know if you guys were crying, but I think everyone tuning in that day was absorbed in the sort of, affection that they had for each other. And a large part of that is because they've shared a lot on the court and off the court over the last, 20 years or so. Played 40 times in total, 24 wins for Rafa, 16 for Federer. So it's one of those rivalries for the ages that we will never be able to forget, because there have been so many top matches, some of which, spoiler alert, will be mentioned more specifically in our top 10 later to come. But I just feel that Roger and Rafa, the two of them, they spearheaded tennis for such a long time that you can't do a top 10 of one without including special mention to the other one, because they were, I guess, so sort of entwined for so many years.
Just their hands holding at the Laver Cup. But I was going to say, is this the ultimate rivalry in tennis, would we say?
I think so. And I think, you go back to the very, very beginning. I think tennis was very boring. It was just Roger Federer just lapping up Grand Slam titles.
Good, wasn't he?
Yeah, without any sort of real competition. Leighton Hewitt gave it a good go, I feel, but he was sort of at the end of his career. And all of a sudden, Rafael Nadal came bursting onto the scene, and it really was, I think, a shot in the arm for men's tennis. And that's what made it, I think, so exciting, was that we got to see this rivalry just progress over, I'll say, their whole careers, and the quality was just the quality just sort of raised the profile of the men's game of tennis. It got tennis talking in conversations completely outside of the tennis world, which it just shows, I think, as I say, the sort of the captivatingness. It's not even a word, but I'm just saying it. The captivatingness of the shows that they were putting on.
What made it so captivating, I was going to say, Kim, because is it the fact it's this sort of the physical side of Rafa, the bull versus the gentleman? I'm sure Rafa is also a gentleman, but what do you think was so fascinating about it from a fan perspective?
I just think, yeah, it's sort of a classic contrast, isn't it? You've got Federer's very elegant, sort of balletic player, single-handed backhand, and then, and also right hand. Then you get this lefty coming on from Mallorca, very physical, like, just kind of making the matches last and last and last, tiring his opponents down, using that spin as well very effectively. And it's just, the contrast in styles and the fact that, Federer was the top dog. No one could touch him. And yet someone was daring to do that. And I think for Federer fans, it probably took a while to get used to that and to sort of actually appreciate those battles. And then, lo and behold, a couple of years later, a certain Serbian comes onto the scene, and both Federer and Nadal fans are a bit like, oh, it's we've got another player
united them though, didn't it?
Almost them, yeah. And I do think that's where and I'm not wanting to make this a Novak Djokovic podcast, of course, but I think he came onto the scene and was very much in their shadow and has really had to work hard to get that kind of love and I don't know, respect. A sort of awareness and respect from the tennis community, because so many people had already gone for, into the Federer fandom, the Nadal fandom, and they were solidly there. And, it's had to take almost a new era of Djokovic fans to come about. And it's funny looking at it now, so many years later, but how it felt at the time and how fresh it all was. But, there's so many nice moments between Roger and Rafa. And I have to say, one of my favorite ones is a hilarious clip. It's on YouTube. It was when they were both filming an advert to promote a charity match back in 2010. And they're trying to get through this sort of scripted advert, and they can't do it without hysterically laughing. And it's just so joyous watching it. So if any listeners haven't seen that, just Google Federer and Nadal laughing.
We'll pop a clip in.
And you can have a watch.
So Rafa, he gives me the look, I gotta start looking.
And it reminded me of sometimes us trying to do the podcast when I can't stop laughing and you're telling me to be quiet.
Don't tell what happens behind the scenes, Kim.
Yeah.
I know.
Spoiler alert.
Ooh.
We're very professional.
Right, let's move on to number 9 in our countdown, and it is something that happened on the court. Davis Cup Finals triumph. Because he was the youngest player to win a match in the Davis Cup final. It was in 2004. 18-year-old Rafael Nadal beat world number 2 Andy Roddick on clay in Spain, and he helped Spain win, I believe, that tie 3-2. But it was just a case of, say, Rafa coming onto the scene and just doing things like, I don't know, you just don't necessarily expect. I mean, Andy Roddick was, let's say, world number 2. Pretty formidable opponent, lots of experience, and Rafa just did not have an answer to the style that Rafa was bringing to the court.
It was so exciting, right? And I think when you look at people who have kind of really come up in that sort of manner, I think it really does set the tone, because it did just show how much of a competitor he was in whatever situation he was in. He's going to fight for every point, whoever it's against. And I think he always had that gritty attitude. I think it's very nice seeing him play once again. That was at home. It's at home again, the Davis Cup finals that are just about to be upon us. And you know that it's going to be the exact same spirit, the exact same player, a lot older, but will be competing in the Davis Cup again. So it's going to be great to see.
Yeah, and I mean, Carlos Moya has said recently it's kind of closing the circle, because Rafa kind of did announce himself somewhat by winning that match against Roddick, helping Spain to that Davis Cup title in 2004, and then 20 years later it's going to be his last last hurrah on the court in his professional career. And between those 20 years, he has won 5 Davis Cup titles for Spain. And I think it's, a very appropriate sort of time and place to finish up in Malaga, imminently. And well, let's hope he may have the same outcome as 2004. But, whatever happens, that match against Roddick was just really announcing himself at home. I think it was in front of, thousands and thousands of fans in Seville. And it was just, started the kind of Spanish revolution, I suppose, with Rafa at the helm, I think, in the tennis world as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it just shows you how much the Davis Cup does mean to players and how much it still means. And I think that's something that's so important, is that some of the most epic moments, and we talked about this in previous versions where we've done it at the top 10 moments, Davis Cup is huge and it means so much to play for their country. And you'll see as we go through the list, there are many moments that we talk about where playing for your country, whether it's the Olympics, the Davis Cup, it has so much impact. So if he does do it again in a couple of days, I'm sure that would also probably make it onto this list. We'd have to make an honorary 11. But that was the springboard for Nadal. And in terms of the future of his career, setting himself up as a player who had real potential. And the place where he first fulfilled that potential was when he won his first Grand Slam title, which brings us to number 8 on our list.
Complicado en el primer set, pero han logrado darle la vuelta en un partido durísimo. Los deja ir ahí.
Con su tío, campeón de Roland Garros.
And I mean, this was quite something because he was still a teenager and he really did upset the apple cart with this win. It really announced him on the international stage. I think there's been so much hype, and we've seen that with so many players who haven't quite been able to get over the line, get that first slam in their teenage years. Players like Coco Gauff have done that now. And it's not to be sniffed at because some players obviously win it a lot later or they never quite achieve that potential. But that was never going to be the case with Rafa. He was something out of the ordinary, almost a once in a generation talent. And he did it in incredible style, going through the draw. I mean, before we get to the final, one memory I have to say, I was in Devon on a family holiday and I was supporting Sebastian Grosjean, who was playing against him in the 4th round.
How dare you?
I know.
That's not acceptable.
And my sister actually takes credit for Nadal's success by saying he's going to go far. And I said, Laura, he's the number 4 seed. I mean, he's expected to win this match, but she thought she picked a talent there. But I mean, I'm sure you both remember, who did he beat in that final?
Do you know what? I do genuinely remember this because as much as it was like amazing to see Rafa in the final, it was so unexpected to see Mariana Puerta in the final. I mean, he's really only known, I think, for this run, the fact that he was unseeded. I was very kind of excited to see, how he was going to get on. We were sort of in this, I think, particularly with the French Open, you could still be a clay specialist and go really deep in the tournament. And was a final between, one of, say, a player who was going to become one of the, if not the greatest clay quarter ever, against a very smooth operator on the clay. And, it just showed, I think, with Rafa that regardless of not having the experience, he was fearless.
Yeah. He lost that first set as well.
He did lose the first set, but regardless, it didn't let that get on top of him. And to think he did this all at 19 years old is, as I say, is incredible. And of course, it was a sign of things to come.
Yeah, I think Puerta had a couple of points to take it into a 5th set, but who knows what may have happened there. I'm sure Rafa would still have come out on top, and he had beaten Roger Federer in the semi-finals to get into the final, and that was the first of many years in a row where he was, Federer just couldn't get past Rafa at the French Open, and in his quest to finally complete, his career slam.
And that was a big result because I remember that they played a couple of times in the lead up to that, and that was where it was really starting to get some attention. They played one match. The first match they played was won by Nadal. That was in Miami the year before. And then in the lead up to that French Open, Federer had got the best of him in an epic 5-set when Masters were 5-set finals. So it really was billed to be probably the top billing of that tournament. And I mean, one of the start of their Grand Slam rivalry that, set the tone for the generation.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess, I wasn't actually a fan of Rafa when he won in 2005. I didn't know about him.
Then. Yeah,
I did not know about him. I started following him a year later because a glory
supporter.
My tennis life was just Jim Hemmon at Wimbledon prior to 2006. Okay. But Rafa is what got me properly following tennis, all year round. So
he
I do
predates your
a
interest in
lot
tennis.
to thank him for. Yes, I know, absolutely. So I don't remember watching that match live, but if I had been, I'm sure I would have been supporting Rafa from the off.
Yes.
And a match that I was very much watching in very nervous just completely nervous and shot to pieces. The 2009 Australian Open final against Federer.
An outburst from Nadal, isn't it?
It's good. Oh, come on!
This was a 5-set thriller. It was the first time they had played outside of the French Open or Wimbledon in a Grand Slam final. And in fact, the 7th of their 9 meetings in a Grand Slam final. It was Rafa's first time at a hardcourt slam final. And, for him at that time, he had won Wimbledon the year before. We knew he was an established clay courter. So to kind of get a slam on another surface to really prove people, I guess, wrong that he wasn't just, a one surface wonder, that he could kind of conquer all three. There was a lot to play for, a lot on the line. And he came through 6-2 in that 5th set. 4 hours and 23 minutes, the match finishing just after midnight. And yeah, for me as a big fan, it was a very stressful match to watch, but really, I think finally ticked that box that proved, Rafa was could do all three
wasn't
surfaces.
Just a clay courter.
Beat Federer in all 3 slam finals on all surfaces.
Yes.
And really, cemented his position even more in kind of, I don't know, that the early history books, so to speak.
And it was such a big deal for Spanish tennis. He was the first Spaniard to win this title. I think that was, male or female, actually, in terms of the fact that this was such a big thing to do it outside of the clay arena. And I remember this because I am a big Federer fan, and I've not always been on the side of Rafa in these clashes.
How dare you, Chris?
It's all coming out, isn't it? I really shouldn't have. We're doing a countdown, and I promise you I get more enthusiastic about the results. But this one, I kept thinking, Federer, he's got to get it at some point, because he had actually lost to him 3 times in slams coming up to this as well. This was a bad run for him, and I thought maybe it's all over for Federer. Obviously it wasn't, but he did actually win more points than Nadal in this final. It just made me think that that's so symbolic of like Nadal. He gets it done, he finds a way to win, and he found a way to win on that day.
Absolutely. And later on, we might be talking about the second time that Rafa won this title. In fact, it was the longest gap, I think, ever between winning 2 Australian Opens. But that will be for the second half. Just a special mention as well for this tournament. I remember the semi-final against Fernando Verdasco, which was another sort of 5-set thriller.
Yeah. I always remember that banana shot. I
can see that. I'm playing that in my head right now.
Just think about that point, like a lot more than a lot of other points, I think.
Just replaying it over and over every night before you go to sleep.
It was so physical. Yeah. That was beyond an epic.
That was like it was crazy, because I do think like Nadal, he plays opponents who in Grand Slams who play like what I would say is like the best they have ever played, and yet they still just come up a touch short. And for me, Verdasco played out of his life. He played the match of his life, and he still lost. It's just unbelievable the levels of stake Nadal has sustained playing at over years and years and years. My number 6 highlight on this countdown is, well, we've been speaking about Rafa and Roger, but as you said, Kim, we also need to talk about a certain Serb, Novak Djokovic, and it's got to be at number 6, his notable French Open victories over Novak Djokovic at the French Open in Roland Garros.
Oh, ho, ho. Oh, ho, ho. What a way to finish it. Extraordinary. What a display of talent.
There have been quite a few, and there have been a few where Djokovic has been the favourite and Nadal has just been like, no, it's not like that, and steamrolled him.
Yes, I think for me, my favourite was the 2020 final, which was that weird one played in October because of COVID. The first two sets, 6-love, 6-2. As a Rafa fan going into it, I was extremely nervous, as I always am.
Was
every
it
time
indoor as well?
he plays
Everyone,
Djokovic.
it was like all the conditions they thought were favouring Djokovic.
Favouring Djokovic, yeah, which made it even more remarkable. But after 2 sets, he'd only lost 2 games, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought, oh, what is happening? Third set, slightly closer, 7-5, but Rafa winning in straight sets. That was to get his 13th French Open, 20, slam overall, so equaling Federer for the all time. And just the sort of surprising nature of the defeat, the one-sidedness of it was, stunning. And that's, for me, it deserves to be on this list alone. But there are also some other instances where they have played. I remember 2012, it was a much closer match. It went over 2 days, though. It was extended due to rain. And that was another kind of very nervy final. They also have played again more recently. 2021, just the year after, or less than a year after Rafa kind of thrashed Djokovic. Djokovic got his revenge. That was that semi-final where the French Prime Minister had to...
There was like protocols in
place.
place.
The COVID regulations so the fans could stay and the match could carry on. I mean,
incredible.
That's crazy if you think about it. And then most recently, 2022, Rafa beating Novak in the quarterfinals when he went on to win his 14th French Open. So they've played so many times there over the years. Djokovic has got some wins, but Rafa's battled through both Federer and Djokovic there, and particularly that 2020 sort of demolition job for me is just outstanding. And I mean, if you look at their rivalry as a whole, 31-29, Djokovic just edging it, but it just goes to show, they played more than, Rafa and Roger have played. Both rivalries iconic and will, always be remembered, I think, to this day. And, maybe we're getting some more rivalries happening with Sinner and Alcaraz, for example. But for me, they're going to have to go some to top these ones that we've been, able to enjoy over the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And let's take a quick break now, but do join us in the second half where we'll be unveiling our top 5 Rafa moments, including our number 1 pick. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast. And Chris, what do we have as our number 5 Rafa memory?
Well, we are talking Olympic success. We talked about playing for your country, and Rafa has done some incredible things playing for his country, winning both the doubles and the singles.
He missed it, and a gold medal for Nadal and Lopez. Two best friends, Mark Lopez and...
It's unbelievable. It wasn't done on the same year, but we won't hold that against him. He obviously won Olympic gold in that phenomenal 2008 season that he had in Beijing. That was such a huge moment for him. But I have to say, I mean, obviously we can talk a bit more about that. I love the Mark Lopez story. I do love a double, almost a scratch doubles pair that comes together and does something magic, because the joy of those two playing together, and their love for each other. He's still in his camp now. When I was in Boston, Mark Lopez is very much still present in his team. And it was just almost like a friendship that got them through. And it was such a beautiful thing to watch when they jumped into each other's arms and all at the end of it. So I think both very, very incredible. But I probably slightly, if I said a 5.5, I would go for the doubles, just because I do love it. But obviously it's a big deal getting the singles gold, and something that Federer was never able to do.
Kim, which one do you have warmer memories of? The doubles gold in 2016 or the singles gold in 2008?
I mean, I think I would agree with Chris, actually. I think the doubles was perhaps a bit more unexpected.
Love a Spanish doubles pair.
You're
as well,
able
though.
to share the
Is this
success.
the Mark Lopez love-in now?
Well,
Yeah.
they are, best mates, and they had actually had some success on the ATP tour. So they knew they worked well together. It wasn't a completely like the first time they'd have ever played. But Mark Lopez, I think, has really been inspired by, I guess, his friendship with Rafa, and has won some slams himself, the World Tour finals, I believe, as well. So he really had a great career and also now retired, but still very close with Rafa. And I just think, yeah, it was sort of like this big Spanish doubles love fest, and it really that year Rafa got to I think he placed fourth in the singles in 2016, so wasn't able to get the medal in the singles. Obviously he'd already done that in 2008 winning the gold, so just to get both categories of tennis medal that you can at the Olympics, again it kind of just completes that set. And I think when you're sharing it with your teammates like he did at the Davis Cup, 5 times over, it makes it special in a different way as well for your country. And Rafa's always been very passionate about, representing Spain.
That's got to be a big moment for both of you because both of your favorite players got gold medals that year, Joel. So Andy Murray in the singles. So I think everyone was winning at that point.
Yeah. And Joel, you know what it's like being a massive fan of a player and kind of, I don't know. Yeah. The emotional journey. And sorry, Chris, I know you're a massive fan of like Daniela Handkova, so I'm not saying you don't know what it's like to be.
I would say Federer. I've had some moments.
I've
had some moments where I'm really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can barely breathe watching it, especially the championship points against Djokovic at that. But we won't talk about that now. We're very much talking about the Olympic success. But I think it is that story when someone gets eliminated and their chance gets almost like they've lost their chance to win the singles medal. It almost means that like it's even more of a joyous moment because it's a bonus. It's something that's a golden lining, which is so rare in sport.
Yeah. Well, my next pick, which is our fourth top Rafa moment on our countdown, was when he achieved the career Grand Slam back in 2010 by winning the US Open at Flushing Meadows.
24 years old. Just completed a career Grand Slam.
Rafa is the youngest male tennis player to have completed the career Grand Slam. He beat Novak Djokovic in his first US Open final to accomplish that feat. The actual match itself was 4 sets. It was, pretty long, pretty grueling. Rafa had come through the tournament, I think, in straight sets. And at that point, funnily enough, Djokovic had only won 1 Grand Slam title, so which just is crazy to think about now. But I just think Rafa getting across this line, completing the set, getting all 4 Grand Slams. I spoke about in 2009 winning the Australian Open, proving himself on a hard court, but to do it at both hard court slams and to do this, being the youngest ever, was just remarkable. And I remember I was in the States when this happened. I wasn't in New York, unfortunately.
What were you doing?
I was on holiday in the West Coast, and I remember going into a toilet at some pizza parlor.
Kim, where's this going?
The scores.
Oh, okay.
And I was just, it was amazing. But I remember a few rounds before I was traveling through Yosemite and the signal was awful and I didn't know what had happened, whether he'd won his quarterfinal or not for about 2 days. So seems bizarre now, but this was before I had a smartphone, I think.
But it was also the career Golden Slam at this point as well, which is something to note. And that's also something when we look at Alcaraz, that's something that he may be taking a lot of records from Nadal, but he cannot break that one, having won the silver just now. So he's holding on to that one for dear life, is Rafa.
Yeah, because Carlos Alcaraz has become the youngest male player to complete a surface slam, winning slams on hard grass and clay. But obviously he hasn't done...
There are 4 to win, Kim. That's what I'm sticking to.
Absolutely. So Rafa in 2010 being the youngest. And I just think, that's a remarkable achievement, being the youngest ever. And, again, beating Novak Djokovic, who has become the top slam winner of all time, to do it as well. It's just, another remarkable achievement in our list of many.
And it probably at that point of his career looked like the sky was the limit. I think that's what's so interesting about the dynamics between the 3 of these players, is that at different times it really has looked like different players would end up on top. I think we all thought Federer would, when he broke Sampras's record, no one would hit 18. No one would hit the numbers that Federer was hitting. And then it became very clear that Nadal was going to go past that. And then more recently, it became very clear that Djokovic could keep going forever. But I think this was very much at a time when the optimism and the hype around him was so real, kind of before any of those sort of really big injury concerns had come in. There was still talk about how long he'd be able to play for, but it was still very much the case that as long as he was fit, he was the person who would be getting all of those records at this point.
It was mostly his knees, I remember, in
Always
this sort
the
of era.
knees.
It was the tendinitis in the knees. For many years, he played with the sort of tape around the below the knees. Yeah, but it's actually not the knees in the end that sort of got him, really.
Well,
Although it's probably all linked.
Bit of age, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just age catches up with everyone.
Exactly.
Right.
Sorry, keep us on track, Joel.
Let's move on to our top 3 Rafa picks, and we're going to be with number 3. I am introducing it. First Wimbledon title in 2008.
Rafa Nadal is climbing right in front of John. Right over Roger Federer's family to get to his parents.
I don't think anyone is going to be forgetting this final anytime soon. Nadal versus Federer. Nadal defeating Federer 6-4, 6-4, 6-7, 6-7, 9-7. I remember it clear as day in the gloom of centre court going into the evening. 4 hours and 48 minutes of just some of the most sumptuous tennis seen on the court. I still think about those 2 passing shots in that fourth set tie break. This really was like, I think, with Federer, that sort of invincibility he had on centre court. And, thinking about Nadal, and, he has obviously had a few hiccups there, from time to time, but certainly on, in this final, he showcased that Spaniards can play incredible tennis on a grass court as well as on the clay.
I mean, this is lauded as the greatest tennis match of all time by many people. Of all time. There have been so many great finals. That Federer Djokovic one in 2019, for example, is up there. But this, just for the sheer drama and the fact that this was Rafa's 3rd final in a row against Federer. He'd lost the last 2 at Wimbledon. Kind of 3rd time lucky. That the 2007 final he'd lost in 5 sets. He'd been crying in the locker room afterwards. And this had been his, lifetime dream to win Wimbledon, as it is for so many players. And the rain delays, the finishing in the darkness, Rafa walking across the commentary box to his team, the King of Spain and the Queen of Spain being
unforgettable moments.
Really unforgettable. And it was in that weird bit where there was no roof, was there? It was before pre-roof. You wouldn't get this now, would you? They'd come off, they'd close the roof, they'd carry on. It just wouldn't be quite the same. So I think it really defined that era of men's tennis. And I don't know if we'll ever see the likes of this sort of drama.
And Bjorn Borg was watching also from the box
I
as
don't
well.
even remember that.
Yeah, because I just remember there just being so many layers to it, and obviously an older generation, a Borg, incredible grass court player back in his day. It just had so many layers to it, but it was just fascinating.
I don't think I breathed the entire match, and I have to say, Kim, I wasn't necessarily supporting Nadal, but now after a number
we cannot be friends, Christopher.
Well, I'd say after a good 15 years, I think I've managed to actually appreciate this match, because some results are, it's almost one of those matches where you don't want anyone to lose it.
No.
But I do think some of those tie breaks, and at 9-7, he is probably, I would argue, one of the most clutch players ever. I think he definitely more so than Federer. I think in terms of those key moments, he is so rock solid and he makes players beat him. And I think that's really what these things comes down to. And he does not make many unforced errors. And I think that's also something we've seen this year, where they have been creeping in, and he is so focused. And the focus that he was able to maintain throughout this whole match is just unbelievable. And I think that's something that's always been true throughout his career, irrespective of how he's feeling physically. And that was never more true than in 2022, which brings us to number 2 on our list. Just one more to go after this, but this is a double entry in terms of the fact that we have the Australian Open and French Open title in 2022.
It's the miracle in Melbourne.
I've talked about this before on the podcast. I do think this is one of the greatest achievements in sport that I've ever witnessed. Everyone going into that period of time had counted him out. He had the foot injury that sidelined him after that Wimbledon match. I think he played one more tournament and lost to your favorite Lloyd Harris. And people thought he was done. I think there've been so many stories about him saying the way that he plays tennis means he can't play forever. He was very much not physically fit necessarily for this season, but he managed to pick up 2 titles. And the heart that he showed on the court, that he may need to be on one leg at the French Open, 1 foot at the French Open, but he was still able to get it done and just showed his class, as well as just the level of talent that he has that he can rely on. And I think I don't know what you think, but in terms of individual achievements in sport, I think there are some Serena achievements that I might put up here as well. And there might be a few others that we can think of. But this, for me, I couldn't believe it. This was an beyond comprehension to me at the start of that year.
When he beat Medvedev from 2 sets down, I remember it being 2 sets down. I thought, oh, great tournament for Rafa. It's just not to be. And then the fact that he turned that around, I think when he got that third set, I had to go into the kitchen.
I'd almost switched off. Yeah, I couldn't watch.
I was washing up, I was cleaning, I was doing stuff, and I was like listening to it on the radio. I actually couldn't watch, but I have obviously since watched it back.
Yes.
But I was getting to full fan superstition mode. I just think it was remarkable, and the fact also that he then won the French Open that year, he was having those like injections into his foot because he just couldn't cope with the pain otherwise. To be basically on one foot and winning these titles is insane.
It's why we never can count him out in any match he plays, and that's why when it comes to Malaga, you can never count him out because of the fact that he can still do so much, and the quality is always there. And I just think, what could he have done that year if he hadn't have been injured? I think that's one of the questions as well. And I think when it comes to why it's been hard for him to step away from the sport, is because he knows what he can do when he isn't physically fit. And so when he's struggling with his form physically now, I think he still thinks, I've got something in there, right until the minute before he decided to retire. And why wouldn't you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, that year, Wimbledon 2022, he won that quarterfinal against Fritz and then had to retire against, before he played Kyrgios in that semi. But he was looking really quite good.
He was looking great
for that Wimbledon, and I would have, been intrigued to see if he would have.
What could have happened?
Could he have won? That would have been remarkable, even more remarkable. But
and the whole next season, he almost had off. Yeah,
yeah. It's just that was kind of the real last, I think, finest moments of Rafa, wasn't it? Those 2 slams at the start of
what a treat.
Yeah, what a treat we got in the twilight of his career. So we have done 10-2. We will be rounding up what we've just done. Let's do a quick recap before we go and reveal our number 1. So we've had at 10 the Federer rivalry, all the moments between them over the years. Number 9 was the Davis Cup finals. The youngest player to ever win a match in the Davis Cup final back in 2004 against Andy Roddick. Number 8, the first Grand Slam title at 2005 Roland Garros. Number 7, the 2009 Australian Open final victory over Federer. Number 6, all those French Open victories over Djokovic, especially that 2020
You love
demolition.
this one, Kim.
I do love that one especially. Number 5, Olympic golds, both in the singles and the doubles. Number 4, getting that career Grand Slam and being the youngest ever male player to do so back in 2010 at the US Open. Number 3, possibly the greatest match of all time.
Only number 3 as well. That's crazy.
I know. It's only our third one. Listeners, you may think, how is that not number 1? But of course, it's,
you're screaming
it's subjective.
At us. Yeah.
And number 2, like we've just said, the 2022 Australian Open and French Open titles, really triumphing over kind of severe injury in that period and pain, and really a lesson and an inspiration to us all. So we will be revealing number 1 shortly. Couple of honourable mentions perhaps though that didn't make the list. Have you got any, Chris?
I actually didn't write something down, but now it's come to me. He changed the fashion game, the short sleeve, the long almost like capri pants situation. I think that's very symbolic as well. That is very important. But for me,
Chris, I would put that on a dishonorable list. I think that was
okay.
That wasn't a great fashion look. The Pirata pants.
I mean, it's not great, is it? But I mean, the sleeveless has certainly pioneered that movement, whether we're for or against it. But I guess for me, it would have been in Bostar, if I'm being serious. I'll do this quite quickly. But the fact that it had been 2005 was the last time he was there, and he was at almost like you can make a movie about that experience of him coming back to such a small town all those years later, looking for form, made it to the final, was reflecting about everything that's happened since. And it was just such a powerful moment to be able to spend so much time with him there, just asking him questions, which is something I never thought I'd be able to do because I thought he was retiring. So that's a personal one for me, but I'm sure there are some others that you both have put forward, but maybe we didn't let them on the list.
I will just say, to win a tournament 12 times like he did in Barcelona and get a court named after him
pretty epic
while still playing, to me is incredible. And to think about kind of legends. They're not always retired and out of the sport. You can be a living legend as well. And Rafa's legacy in Barcelona at that tournament is incredible. And to play on your own court, that's a pretty cool flex that I don't think many people have ever been really afforded.
What about the celebrations? They're also good, right? We've got to give those a special
Jumping
mention.
into the swimming pool.
Swimming pool at Barcelona. I think the lying on your back,
the routines as well.
Out.
You know,
the water
the bottles, the running to the back of the court. He's an icon in so many ways. I'm going for really like specific things. I think we should stick with the big achievements.
I mean, you could also go down the cultural route. He appeared in a Shakira video, Gypsy.
Oh, yes, a Tommy Hilfiger underwear.
Some underwear modelling.
Yes.
I mean, 11-time champion at Monte Carlo. It's one of my favourite tournaments. Just seeing Rafa play there a few times, brilliant.
Honestly, what hasn't he done at this point?
I know. And talking of, record number of titles on clay courts, that does bring us nicely on to our number one
drum roll, please,
Rafa
everybody.
Moment.
Here we go.
That has got to be the iconic 14 French Open titles that he has to his name.
Becomes even greater. It is a 14th Roland Garros title.
To have won a Grand Slam tournament 14 times is insane. He won his first one at the age of 19 in 2005 and his 14th one in 2022 at the age of 36. And over those years, he has a 97% win percentage at the French Open. It's remarkable how dominant one player can be. I mean, between 2005 and 2014, he won 9 out of 10 titles. From 2017 to 2022, 5 out of 6 titles. I remember the first loss he had in 2009 against Soderling and the sort of shockwaves.
I mean, the biggest upset probably in history at that point.
Across the tennis world. There's just, incredible. I can't think of a comparable achievement in another sport of that dominance at one location or on one kind of.
Do we think it will ever be matched?
No, I don't think so. I think we talked about maybe on the women's side if Iga could continue, but I don't think it would be matched in terms of as the crowning moment or the crowning tournament in what is already a phenomenal career. Even if you remove those 14 slams, it still is a Hall of Fame career outside of that on hard courts as well. I think it's an unbeatable record. And I mean, the King of Clay, I think that probably does summarize this one. Have we ever experienced someone who's been this dominant on a surface for such a long period of time as well, such a physical surface? And as you say, I mean, there's a long time between those results happening, and to stay at the top and be so dominant for that period of time, I mean, that's almost unbelievable.
And I think, that obviously this year when he kind of came out onto the court, the announcer, when it was almost like the warm up was as long as the announcement, because the announcement would go into my French is terrible, but it was like demi douze, demi six, demi set, demi. It was just so incredible to just hear just like how many titles he has won, and I say the crowd are just appreciating every single title it has been. And I think it's interesting because I think there's an argument to say, that could be incredibly boring, or like that's not that fun, and to see one person just really dominant. But actually, I would say with Rafa at the French, it's just been great. I think to see a master at work and just be appreciative that we're living at a time when we've been able to watch Rafa play the way he does at Roland Garros.
I mean, incredible. Like when he was sliding, I was right courtside in Boston watching him. When he slides towards you, it's goosebumps because you can't believe that you're witnessing like the pinnacle of what can be done on that surface is right in front of you. I think it's an unbelievable record, and it kind of brings you onto like the legacy. And I think Kim, like in terms of as being, your favorite player, such an icon globally, what are some of the things, whether it's kind of character traits or what do you think will be his lasting legacy to the sport?
I mean, I think obviously that domination on clay, the fact that he's achieved so much, ticked pretty much all the boxes, those rivalries he's had with Djokovic and Federer, especially, and being a beacon and, for Spanish tennis. But I think for me, like you said, character traits, he's so respectful on the court. He never smashes rackets. He has that real integrity and sportsmanship, which a lot of players sadly seem to be lacking with their behaviour in recent years. And, that's a big bugbear of mine. But I think also, he has his academies set up, especially, the home base in Mallorca. A lot of current players actually go there to train. So I think with that kind of educational lens that he's, continuing his work and his legacy, perhaps we'll get a future star coming out of one of his academies. But I don't know what's next for Rafa in terms of whether he stays in tennis in another capacity, not just the fact that he's got these academies. I don't know if he'll do some TV work or go into coaching. I don't know, but I think even if he did nothing of the sort, his legacy is already kind of set up, and it's a really freaking good one.
Well, there you go. There you go. That was our countdown of Rafa's Tennis Weekly's Rafa top moments, our top 10. Listeners, let us know what you think. Did we miss any moments? What would be your number one moment? Do let us know on social media. But we're going to wrap up our countdown there. I do hope you've enjoyed listening to our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. As always, remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action from the ATP and WTA tours.
We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all major podcasting platforms out there. So if you like what you're hearing, then do make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as well as a like and subscribe to us on YouTube.
And you can follow our coverage of Nadal as he goes through his final chapter. We will be covering that result in Malaga, whichever way it does go for him. And that will be on the podcast, but also on our social channels on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X. And you can also purchase our Tennis Weekly merch at etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly podcast. You can email us to tell us if you didn't agree with us, or tell us if you agree with us, which we'd much prefer. And that's tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, or check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next week for another tour catch up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye. And it's goodbye from Rafa.
Adios, we should say.
Adios.
Oh, yes, adios. And I guess sadly it's goodbye from Rafa and it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.